Your Graces, I present myself today to the Senate for the last of our sessions investigating the events concerning the death and alleged resurrection of Mr. Jesus Josephson, formerly of Nazareth, but of no fixed abode. Your Graces, over the last few weeks we have considered the evidence from Legionary Julius Dimas. We've considered the evidence from the women that worked with Mr. Josephson over the course of his ministry, particularly focusing on Miss Mary Magdalena. We've considered the disciples who were on the road to Emmaus, and last week we explored the evidence of Mr. Thomas Didymus. Today is our last session, and we shall be exploring the testimony of Simon, son of Jonas, who is also known apparently as Rocky to Mr. Josephson, although in the barbaric language of Greek that they insist on writing things down in Palestine, that comes out as Petros or Petra or Peter or something like that. So Mr. I shall simply refer to him as Mr. Rocky because I can't keep track of son of this and Simon and Peter and so Mr. Rocky appears to be somewhat of a leader amongst the disciples of Mr. Josephson. You'll see in Appendix 8 and 9 various accounts that we've already managed to gather of the ministry of Mr. Josephson, showing that on certain occasions Mr. Rocky, along with James and John, the sons of Zebedee, also known as the sons of Thunder, I believe because of their attitude and their rather short tempers, they were taken off especially by Mr. Josephson for particular tuition. He was clearly grooming them for positions of high leadership within his organization. Mr. Rocky, the story is really quite complicated, Your Graces. Mr. Rocky, it would appear from the evidence we have prior to Mr. Josephson's execution, was very confident that he would be able to protect Mr. Josephson from any attacking forces. In the end, Mr. Rocky, along with the rest of Mr. Josephson's disciples, fled the scene of his arrest. However, it does appear that Mr. Rocky and John, one of the two other core disciples, went to the high priest's house in order to try and find out what was going to happen to Mr. Josephson, and Mr. Rocky was there identified by a servant girl as being one of Mr. Josephson's disciples. However, he manages to avoid arrest and crucifixion himself by denying that he has ever known Mr. Josephson, which is a very, very curious thing. He was prepared to die for Mr. Josephson, and now he denies him 3 times, escaping from legal authority and the consequences of his actions. It would appear that Mr. Rocky was present at the tomb on the Sunday morning. He was present in the upper room. You will recall on the evening of that first day of the week when Mr. Josephson allegedly appears to his disciples, and he is present through all of the ensuing events, right up until this particular account, Your Graces. At this point, Mr. Rocky appears to go back to his former occupation, which was as a fisherman, and he goes fishing And nothing happens. Now, your graces, this is in Galilee. You may have heard of Galilee. I believe some of you may even have holidayed in Galilee. It is quite a beautiful part of that country. But the Sea of Galilee is absolutely full of fish. You can put your hand in and pull 5 fish out, 1 on each finger. So for an experienced fisherman to catch nothing is really quite extraordinary. It's almost miraculously bad. I don't know if Mr. Rocky had particularly poor luck on this occasion. So early in the morning, they'd caught nothing. A gentleman on shore says, "Have you caught anything?" And they, of course, say, "No, we haven't." He then says something which Mr. Josephson is reported to have said previously when calling Mr. Rocky to be one of his disciples. "Throw your nets onto the other side of the boat." And immediately they catch a vast number of fish, 153 fish, I believe the report says, a peculiarly specific number. Pretty certain that one of the members of Mr. Josephson's disciples must be quite specific in their need to count things. It is a trait which your graces will be quite familiar with amongst some of the savants in our city. So Mr. Rocky then dives into the water and swims to shore. One does wonder whether he's hoping to have a quiet word with Mr. Josephson before the others arrive. Because according to all of the reports, Mr. Josephson has not mentioned Mr. Rocky's betrayal at any previous point. However, Mr. Josephson waits until the others arrive. They cook fish. He eats fish as a demonstration, I presume, of his vitality. And he then asks Mr. Rocky, "Do you love me?" In fact, he asks, "Do you love me unconditionally?" To which Mr. Rocky replies, "Lord, you know that I love you like a friend." The Greek language, you will recall, has a number of different words for love. And it is quite important that your graces understand the nuances of this encounter. Again, Mr. Josephson asks Simon, son of Jonas, "Do you love me unconditionally?" And Peter responds, Mr. Rocky, responds, "Lord, you know I love you like a friend." There is none of the bluster and bravado that we've seen in the rest of Mr. Rocky's evidence. He appears to be a broken man. Finally, Mr. Josephson says to Mr. Rocky, "Simon, son of John, do you love me like a friend?" And the 3 times he's asked this question appear to correspond to the 3 times that he's allegedly to have denied ever knowing Mr. Josephson. And Mr. Rocky replies, "Lord, you know I love you like a friend." And then Mr. Rocky appears to be appointed as the leader of the new movement to spread the news about Mr. Jesus Josephson's resurrection. He is sent, he is commissioned as its first leader. Whatever you loose on earth, you will be loosed in heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Those are words that are in Appendix 10 and 11 as well. Your Graces, the choice of Mr. Rocky, Simon, son of Jonas, Peter, is the most bizarre of all of the things that I have recounted to you regarding these accounts of the death and resurrection of Mr. Jesus Josephson. For he is a failure. He denies Josephson's existence, and then is somehow invited back into the prime position of leadership of Mr. Josephson's followers. It is, your graces, beyond comprehension. It is compelling evidence of what I suggested to you last week. I suggested last week, when we were considering the evidence of Mr. Thomas Didymus, that there were three possible outcomes. Either that these people were utterly deluded in their belief that Mr. Josephson had risen from the dead, or that they were party to the most ridiculous conspiracy, or that they did indeed believe the truth that Mr. Josephson had risen from the dead. Your graces, I leave you to make your own minds up on the evidence of this case. But having explored all of the evidence provided to your graces, I have to say that I find it utterly compelling. And so, your graces, I must inform you that effective immediately, I shall be resigning from my position as counsel to the Senate. A boat will be leaving this afternoon from the local harbour, and I hope to be in Jerusalem by next Sunday. Pentecost, as they call the festival, is a time of gathering, and I intend to be there amongst the followers of Mr. Jesus Josephson as they gather next Sunday. For I have been convinced by the evidence that you have heard that the reports of Mr. Jesus Josephson's resurrection are incontrovertible. I believe them to be true, and I must act upon that. So, your graces, I tender my resignation, and I leave you to your deliberations. Only you can decide whether this man, Mr. Jesus Josephson of Nazareth, truly rose from the dead in the Ides of Aprilis. Only you can decide whether you think that is true or not. I have made my decision, and I leave you now. It has been an honour to serve your graces. This Senate shall rise.